Today I'm going to talk about adding stationary decoders to Kato turnouts so that you can control them remotely from your phone using a DCC command station. This was how my setup worked before I decided to take the plunge into DCC. I had this Kato smart controller. It's a DC controller. It allows me to control DC locomotives remotely with my phone because I have this long, 16-foot long shelf in my garage, and I was building all these temporary Kato layouts on it with Unitrack. And I just simply wanted to be able to walk along with my train as it was traversing this really long track. So I wanted to figure out how to do like a remote control for my train, and this was the simplest solution I could find. And this is basically just a DC controller, like any other controller. It's got a 12-volt power supply, and then it's got the bus that goes into the track. But instead of having direction and speed on this box, you install an app, the smart device controller, and then you've got instant remote control. So that's pretty much my setup before I got into DCC. Now, with the turnouts, there's really no way to add turnouts to this. So the turnouts would have to be switched with these Kato turnout switches, which is fine. But then I got the itch to be able to run multiple trains on the same track at the same time, and I realized DCC was the way that I really wanted to go. So then I started doing a deep dive into how to wire for DCC, how to wire turnouts for DCC using DCCEX. They have a great website. They have step-by-step instructions on how to build your own command station, exactly what you need, exactly how to build it, step-by-step, super easy. And in a lot of ways, the DCC command station works kind of like the smart controller. It's got a 12-volt power supply. It's got this track bus that comes out of it and then goes into the Kato track. So in that respect, it's identical to this. One difference is this DCC command station needs two power sources. It needs a power supply to power the Arduino Mega, or the Elegoo, same thing. And then it needs another power supply here, 12 volt, 5 amp actually, to power the motor shield, which sits right on top of the brain. And then on top of the motor shield is the Wi-Fi shield, which basically just lets this device communicate with a phone app. So now, instead of using our smart device controller app, we're going to use the Wii Throttle app. And so now we've got DCC up and running on our Kato track. And all we did was unplug the Kato smart controller. We plugged in our DCC controller. There's two different options for power on these turnouts. There's little screws on the bottom of these turnouts. One setting is power routing, and one setting is non-power routing. And for DCC, you just switch the little screws to the non-power routing setting, which basically means it's providing power to all the track all the time. With DC, you tend to want to go with power routing because you might want to pull a locomotive off here and then switch tracks and then run another locomotive here, but you don't want this locomotive to go. So power routing for DC means the power is either being routed through one branch or the other. But with DCC, you can just run power through everything all the time. So no special wiring at all to get this DCC locomotive up and running on this Kato Unitrack. Other than building this, which has step-by-step instructions on the DCC EX website, and installing a DCC decoder into this locomotive, which in my opinion is like the trickiest part. So once I had that working, my last problem really was how to get the turnouts working again, because now I've got these Kato turnouts. They go to these little Kato turnout switches. How do I plug them in my DCC system, or do I power them separately, and does that even work? I don't know. I was just really confused about how to get turnouts going. And then also, since I'm controlling my trains from this app, I really wanted to be able to control the turnouts from the app too, because there's a feature for turnouts. I could see that it was possible to get turnouts working, but I didn't really understand how to do that. So after a bunch of research, I realized that what I needed to do was install decoders into the turnouts, just like I installed a decoder into the locomotives. And that seemed really scary to me, but it turns out that installing these decoders into the turnouts, it can be dead simple. These are a different type of decoder than the decoders I put in here. So taking my little Kato pocket line locomotive apart, this is actually a body that I printed myself, but this is basically an 11109 Kato power unit. And this is the decoder that I installed into this unit, and it's a tiny little micro decoder for like basically made for in-scale stuff. But it's different than a stationary decoder. So these stationary decoders are actually just kind of like little momentary switches. So we do away with this blue switch completely, and we're gonna wire this into this, and then out of this back into this. What we actually need to do is run this into the main line. We just need a momentary burst of 12-volt power every time we flip the switch. I decided to use one of these little terminal blocks, so I'm going to route the power into it and then out of it, and then I can plug as many turnouts into these side banks as I want. And so then my main bus will power the main line, but it will also power the turnout. All right, so now we still have a very simple setup. So first I'm going to test it just to make sure the power is still flowing properly, and also make sure my locomotive still works after I just took it apart and put it back together. It's funny, the decoders are tiny and the wires are tiny and everything seems really fragile, but I have manhandled these locomotives and the decoders so many times, and they're actually pretty durable. I have yet to fry any decoder or any turnout solenoid. But yeah, so we've got power. These decoders even come with instructions. It's actually quite simple. Per the instructions, it's going into the orange and gray wires of our stationary decoder. And then we have our decoder here, and then it's coming out through the red and black wires and into our track power here. This is like your normal throttle mode, but if you slide that over, I've got 3 sidings here, and these show up here because I've added them to my automation file. All you really have to do is add a turnout line. So I've decided just to add a bunch more turnouts in my code so I don't have to do it again for a while. So I'm keeping these 2 sidings are for this micro layout. I'm going to leave those as is. I changed fiddle yard. I'm just calling it 52. And then I've added a 53, 54, and 55. And these sub-addresses are just some like programming geek stuff that I don't even fully understand. I'm just follow the instructions in the DCC EX documentation. But so now that I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got 6 turnouts defined in my automation file. When I re-upload the code base to the command station, instead of these 3 turnouts appearing, it's going to find all 6 of these, and they should all appear in this app. So let's try it. I'm going to verify. So now I'm going to upload it. So now if we go back into our Wii throttle, connecting to server, so now the new code base is on here. I didn't change anything except for that automation file that contains the turnout code. And now see, so now I've got all these turnouts that I can assign to decoders. As I add more turnouts and more decoders, I can just use these. And then if I ever want to go back in and name them, like I did with these two sidings, I can do that. I just have to go back into my code base, put names there instead of numbers, re-upload it, and then I'll have nice labels on all my turnouts. So the last thing we need to do is actually assign this turnout to one of these. Let's say we want this turnout to go here. First, we turn off our track power, and then we give ourselves access to this yellow wire that comes out of the decoder. All right, so now I've freed this yellow wire from the electrical tape. So now we've got a live yellow wire here. This is our programming wire. Touch it to the negative track. We turn the track power on, and then we type in an address that we want to use. So let's go 55, and then we press throw. I'm gonna turn the track power off. I'm gonna remove the yellow wire. I'm gonna tape it with electrical tape, turn our track power back on. So now we have our locomotive working. We can control our turnouts. And that's it. That's pretty much how I went from DC to DCC, and getting these turnouts working, in my opinion, is just as easy as installing momentary switches on DC turnouts, with the upside that you can get them working remotely. So I've got the turnouts working again on my micro layout. Originally, all this stuff was inside the layout, and it was really hard to work on. My new strategy is to have all the guts, all the wiring external. I think my big project for the new year is to make this all contained inside like a package with plug and play stationary decoders, so that I can just take this command station and just plug it into any layout. These turnouts, they don't really care what decoder gets plugged into them anymore. They just have their line that comes out. So yeah, my ultimate goal is a plug and play system